Now, we don't want to put you on the spot.
No, of course not.
I really do. So we've been talking about our experience with a being who exemplified in a body the combination of love and awareness that we have been talking about, and Ram Dass has given different anecdotes about being with that person. And so a couple of things here. I want to talk certainly about the glue that brings love and awareness together eventually as one, in my mind, because we experienced that with this being. He actually was sitting in that place that we've been talking about. But before that, you have been close to Ram Dass for 40 years? Was that about it? Something like that? And I have spent some time with you both, and I see the essence that you both swim in together. In fact, when I'm there, it's just one thing. It's not something to do with just you, but that essence seems to be, and you've said it yourself, I love Ram Dass's love of Maharaji. I love when he tells stories about him and that essence comes to be. But in your own experience of your tradition, that guru, quote unquote, which you said yesterday, that you had some ambivalence about that concept. But yet when you come into this pool, you seem to be swimming in it no differently than we are. So can you just talk a little bit about your experience of Maharaji?
That's not what we talked about at breakfast. Thanks, Roger.
Of course, related to love and awareness.
So I live in a place called Upaya. It's a beautiful Zen center in Santa Fe. In fact, I want to just pick you all up and take you into our temple, just a magic carpet. Ron's been there, and RD has been there, and Uma has been there. And the experience that I feel when I'm with RD and he talks about Maharaji is very much what I experience in my practice. And it is this feeling of Buddha nature or awakened nature. It is. So what is this awakened nature that we're touching into, or we're touched by, or that is also who we really are? And I think that when I come here, I'm reminded, as I sit in the retreat, not just of the spirit of the bodhisattvas who exemplify the different qualities of compassion, but also in our own Western tradition, some of the qualities of love that are articulated in the world of the Greeks. And one particular one, but I want to mention a few other ones because they're very interesting, because they're in my relationship with Ram Dass, and my relationship with Ram Dass is not separate from my relationship with Neem Karoli Baba. And in Greek philosophy, one of those qualities is called eros. And it is this kind of passionate love. And as I said, I come every year to propose marriage to Ram Dass so I can watch him cringe. Well, we're sort of within, an appropriate age range. So, I kind of get away with it without offending too many people. But I don't want to completely disavow the beauty of the body and the beauty of actual love in the body. So when he and I kiss, there is that transcendent dimension, but there's also the erotic dimension. And it's not... So this is now eternally recorded. Been caught. And it was so wonderful. At breakfast this morning, I was standing next to RD, and he put his arm around my waist. And it was that feeling of, there was this sense of eros there that I know he didn't experience. But that, food. But in the Buddhist tradition, in the tantric tradition of Buddhism, not to say we've gotten that far into our situation, but in the tantric tradition, the bringing together of love and awareness is exemplified by images of males and females in yabyum, in a sexual embrace. And so, that aspect, I think, is really important for us to, bring into our world, although, and by the way, your teacher had a whole lot of kids. It wasn't necessarily exactly immaculate conception. Three, well, that'll do. So there's that, the erotic aspect. And then there's a dimension of love that's called stergo. Does anybody know what that means? Has anybody heard of that? Well, I think we're feeling it not only in our relationship, the one between RD and me, and of course Raghu and Ramesh and Saraswati. It's companionate love. That's a beautiful, we're companions on the way. We've broken bread together. This means with bread, we're companions on the way. And the kind of love that we're experiencing is not only unifying wisdom and compassion, but it's the deep shoulder-to-shoulder kind of love of companions, of sangha, of community. And I think that's really so powerful that Ram Dass's friends and Neem Karoli Baba's students for decades have stayed together in a kind of karas, in this sangha. And that's a powerful example for us, really. I mean, a lot of times we're into kind of serial monogamy, or not even that, and we're sort of in and out of the taxi cab of relationship. But what we see here in this body, in this moment, is the profound value of stergo, of this companionate love that goes on and on through time and through different identities. And then there's philo, like in philosophy. Philo is this quality of love that comes, what is it? Stergo is less commonly known, but philo. What kind of love is that?
Like filial.
Right. And say more about that. What would be the quality of filial love?
Mutual respect.
Sense of respect. Sense of closeness. And then we have the love that gets evoked in our space, particularly when Ram Dass talks about Neem Karoli Baba, and that's agape. You know, and this is a kind of feast of agape that we come together in, where the sense of divine love is present, that's completely unconditional. And what I love about the play that we engage in through the music and the place and our mutual relationships is that those four aspects of love are unpacked or unfolding like a kind of lotus as we're here together, you know, the different petals of love. It's really beautiful. And how that's manifested in my own tradition is through the meme, if you will, of the Bodhisattva, who has many inflections, whether it's Siddhigarbha or Avalokiteshvara, whether it's Manjushri, that love and compassion and kindness and altruism and the unconditioned heart have all of this, you know, many flavors. So, you know, Philo is also this love of the mind, love of the heart, love of the body, love through the medium of the unconditioned. So for me, as a, you know, I started practicing when I was in my 20s. I think I mentioned this. I went to this talk by Alan Watts, and it was like, wow, I'm one of those. It was just this, in the mid-60s, he was in New York, and I was in New York, and it was just this big wake-up call. And I went, wow, it makes so much sense to me. And then I read the books of D.T. Suzuki, and then I began to practice like so many of you, you know, your sort of book Baba devotees. I began to sit and was a book Buddhist until I met my first teacher, who was just a really wild teacher. And I actually met my first teacher through Jack. Jack Cornfield said, you know, I bet you and this guy are a good fit. And it was a really wonderful 10 years I spent with this particular teacher. And I was telling Moo this morning in the car, he asked I produce this little book called About Face. And in the back of the book, there's a photograph of someone who is Asian and has this very sort of clear and empty countenance. And I said to Moo about my first teacher, oh, someone's trying to get hold of someone. It must be. I said to Moo, that was my first Zen teacher, my first embodied Zen teacher. And I left him because he wasn't so oriented toward engaged Buddhism. You know, Buddhism that was more in the trenches. I really was grateful to train with him. But right before he died, when he was in Korea, I went back to stay with him, to visit him. And he asked why I was coming back, because he was kind of angry I left him. And the abbot of the monastery said, she's going back to coming back here to thank you. And he said, okay, good. So when I went to see him, I made my prostrations and I said, you know, you did so much for me. You really opened the door of practice for me. I learned so much from you, and I'm so grateful for this experience of, you know, 10 years of intensive practice with you. And he looked right through me. Now, he was dying. He was just a few weeks from dying, and he was going through the experience of 3 times a day parenteral feeding, which was really hard. And he had a lot of personality when he was younger. But in this period of his active dying, his personality had completely disappeared. And he was just open, just clear, like he'd seen space and he had become space. And he wasn't talking, at least to me. And I didn't take it as a rejection. That was a kind of nonverbal exchange. But in any case, I felt his awareness upon me, but I also felt in the emptiness that he was manifesting, I felt his love. And I got up to leave, and before I put my hand on the door, I turned around and I said to him, Sansanim, can I give you a kiss?
Thank you.
And he went like this. And I walked a few steps back to him and I kissed him on the cheek, and I could just feel this sort of bloom of warmth before his death on his cheek. Yeah, so I tell you that story because Moo sort of helped me recall it this morning, but that connection had those qualities of love, you know, eros and stergo and philo and agape. It's not for me in my practice to rest only in agape, but to realize that within agape there is stergo, philo, and eros. And within eros there's agape and stergo and philo and so on. That these valences of love inter-are. Yeah. So I think I want to just say one more thing, Raghu, about this. At a certain point in my own practice, I got, what could I say, too cooled down by Zen. You know, it was too cool. And I'm a woman, and when I was younger, I was a very sensual woman and very alive, and I think I'm still at 70 pretty, you know, out there, alive, but kind of have a different frame of reference now. But because of working in the context of so much suffering, of working with dying people and people in the prison system, and living in a community since 1979, but even before that, in this field of Zen, I felt like I wanted something a little different. I wanted another flavor in my Buddhism. So I began to study with Tibetan teachers because of their emphasis on bodhicitta. It's really been an important part of my practice to actively cultivate before I do sitting practice, you know, zazen, which is shikantaza, very aware-based practice, awareness-based practice, to actively cultivate compassion and to do it every time I sit. So at the beginning of my practice, I don't practice just what's called ultimate bodhicitta. I practice relative bodhicitta. I bring to my heart and mind somebody who's close to me, I have a connection with, who's really suffering, or a place that's really suffering. So like when we were ramping up for this war in Iraq, I would bring an image of a pregnant woman in Baghdad. Or in the past few years, I'll bring an image of a woman in the Congo who's been raped. So I have a real close connection with Eve Gensler and her work. Or I'll bring the image of a caregiver who's just wasted. Or a person who has cancer and is actively dying. I make it, you know, as real as possible so that I have this kind of activation, and I send, like I did in the practice that yesterday with RD, I send this love and kindness toward these people or this place, like when the Gulf of Mexico was just, you know, an oil slick. I sent love to the Gulf of Mexico. I've sent love to the mountaintops that have been removed in Kentucky. I mean, you know, it's like alive for me because I feel like it's really important in our practice to have this awakened and engaged sense of an alive and a lived compassion. Not just kind of theoretical and not just what we call absolute compassion, which is compassion which is there all of the time in this experience of non-referential compassion. But I practice with compassion that is biased, that's referential. And then from that base, the base of cultivation of bodhicitta, that my practice is not just a self-improvement program or just to be, you know, in the great happiness. But my practice is actively dedicated toward the well-being of others. And that kind of altruism, and I don't always act like that, and I fall off the wagon all the time, and I can really have bad moments. Feet of clay. So don't expect me to be, you know, a walk on water, perfect type of person, because I'm not. But I also practice compassion and looking toward my own situation and realize my own fragility and my own limitations. And so we have a line that we teach our caregivers, because caregivers, people who take care of others, like the kind of thing Ram Dass has done, or the people who now take care of Ram Dass, but also myself and the people that I teach and work with. So we teach these various phrases, and one of these phrases, talking about the cultivation of a kindness toward oneself, goes, "May I see my own limits with compassion, just as I view the suffering of others." May I see my own limits with compassion, just as I view the suffering of others. So in the beginning of practice, it's to generate bodhicitta, that may I awaken in order to save all beings from suffering. And then at the end of practice, may the merit of this practice nourish each thing in all realms and benefit all beings. It's to dedicate whatever goodness that has arisen in the context of your meditation or service or your walk on the beach or the breeze bringing you home here at Lumarian. May the merit of this moment, the feeling of well-being, of release, may the presence of Maharaji in my heart, may the presence of each other and of our wonderful body, may that well-being, the goodness that I experience, nourish all beings. So the thing that one learns about love is you cannot bank it. You can't accumulate it. That love works because you let go of it. You send it, you share it. You send the blessing in the world. And in that way, so we understand that the base of what we're touching in here is, in my tradition, is called Buddha nature, or awakened nature. That's who each being really is. And in that way, then, love naturally follows. When you recognize, as you look at someone and you're not saying, well, this person has this neurotic problem and that neurotic problem, you're looking at the truth of their suffering, but deeper than their suffering, into who they really are, which is Buddha, which is an awakened being. And from that, love arises. So that's a little on my perspective.
And I was going to ask you about compassion, but you went right into it. Not to tie this up with too neat a bow, but our own experience is sitting with, going back to showing that footage of Maharaji and sitting with him, there was nothing else that he was there for except bodhicitta.
Yeah.
There was nothing else, and you knew that. It was everything, every action from the infinitesimal to the large, the big miracles and all that, were just perfectly designed to help people in a compassionate way. Is compassion the glue or the connectivity of love and awareness?
So, I have a particular way of looking at compassion, Raghu, but I'm just thinking about Ram Dass yesterday in the pool, and I'm thinking about Ram Dass's presence here, and I'm thinking, I know that RD is just amazingly nourished by all of you. You can just see his energy rising up, and it'd be kind of not too cool for him to just kind of sit around all the time without us. He really, your love is good for him. So I'm really grateful you're here. And your love is not pity. I mean, that's the other thing, that what makes this experience so rich is that the love is shared. He's radiating and you're radiating. And compassion is, it includes love. It includes kindness as well. It as well includes attention, the actual capacity to be very stable when you offer attention to RD. You're not divided and dispersed and all over the place. You're just lending Ram Dass your attention. It's really beautiful. It's more than lending. You're not taking it back. You're giving, not paying. You're giving him your attention. So that's a really important aspect of compassion, that you have the kind of practice and as well the capacity to have the quality of attention be stable. And you also have the capacity to offer it in the way that you do. So that's one really essential element of compassion. Another element has to do with what we've generated here as a community. And in the world of social psychology, the word is pro-social. I mean, we're experiencing a lot of love. And we're experiencing, in relation to each other, a lot of kindness. And we're also experiencing gratefulness. And we can extend it, out into the world, even to those who've hurt our feelings, as forgiveness. So that's another bundle of qualities. And what's fascinating is that our own capacity to be kind influences our capacity to attend. It's really fascinating. The more pro-social we are, the more love and kind we are, the greater our capacity for attention is. It's really beautiful. So I'm so grateful we've turned off all our technology, so to speak, that we're not fracturing our attention, but really lending it or offering it in an undivided way. The other complex that I think is really important in compassion has to do with the cognitive or the discerning part. It has to do with wisdom. That it really, that wisdom is involved with us having a deep moral ground, and that we, at the cognitive level, we understand that love and compassion are a kind of moral imperative. I mean, this stuff is that we're engaged in here. It's not just to sort of get some stuff for us, and it's another deck chair, so to speak, or another piece of technology. It's actually about how we leave here today or tomorrow and bring this out into the world. And just on the level of the cognitive, we understand, we can just say, this is the right thing to do. This is the nourishing in-breath that allows us more energy to give to the world. And there are many more other cognitive aspects, but let me say that one of the ones in compassion that's really powerful, I mentioned yesterday, is not being attached to outcome. And did I talk about, well, no, I'm not going to go into it. In any case, love and compassion, from my point of view, is an old Buddhist person. They can't be separated. Nor can awakening be separated. Nor can discernment. I mean, discernment is wisdom. And wisdom beyond wisdom, prajna, wisdom beyond wisdom, is wisdom. You think, what is it to be a wise person in the world today? And that means to be a compassionate person, an awake person, a loving person. So when R.D. and R.D.'s companions speak about Neem Karoli Baba, what it does for me is it primes my bodhicitta. It's like a pump, right? And I can feel the nectar. And that nectar brings me literal physical health. And it brings me literally mental health. And it also frees me up in a certain way from the kind of, what could I say, the sense of duty that plagues the West. It's more about the experience of freedom that Sharon and I are going to be exploring in July. This is what liberation is. This is what freedom is. Something like that.
Yes. Wonderful, Nagoshi, wonderful. Ramdas?
This is two stories about Maharaji. Come following you remarks. I was with all these Western devotees, and they were very uncompassionate towards Maharaji, and I had brought them there, and terrible, and I looked at them, and I really just hated them. And Maharaji saw that I was agitated,
Uptight.
and he called me up to his target and
You
said,
saw that because you threw a plate of food at somebody.
I think uptight is an understatement.
and he said, something the matter? I said, I can't stand them. And he said, I've told you to love everybody. But Maharaji, they're just uncompassionate. And so he's called for a glass of milk to give me. And nose to nose. I told you to be loving all the time. And with that, I looked over at the Westerners, who I really hated. And I looked at them as spiritual beings, and I such love for them, such love. From that moment, next story, I was there was a wall in the temple, a new wall, and Maharaji was in front of the wall, and most the Westerners were on the front, behind the wall. And I had a vantage point at one of the second floor rooms to Maharaji's window. And Maharaji, that morning, he told us never get angry with, never get angry. And I was watching Maharaji, and there was a sadhu who was around the temple, and he was talking to Maharaji, and Maharaji was so angry. He was, he was so, and he said not to get angry. And so that night, he tuned was one of his Indian devotees, and he said, did Ramdas watch me get angry? And I don't know, Maharaji. Well, he did. And this night he's going to understand. So that night was darshan, and there was a couple fighting, and they came to Maharaji to counsel them, and he said to them, the only people you could get angry with are people to whom you feel great love. And he took his hand to me. That sadhu, he was in charge of the storeroom, and he let potatoes rot. And Maharaji, oh boy, you don't waste food. But he had taken care of that sadhu, and in the past, and yet he loved that sadhu because he was loving. He was angry at him. Don't get angry. Or only get angry with people you
I think that's an awful way to end this.
He also,
Quite frankly. Would you take it back?
actually, he also said at that time, you can be angry, but do not throw anyone out of your heart.
Okay, that's better. That was.
Yeah, I did.
Well, we don't have much time left, you see, and I think we should have some availability for some questions.
Wonderful.
So, Mike, anybody have a question? I have some questions from the online audience as well, but let's take one from here.
This is for Ramdas. You spoke about Maharaji having a sense of a person's pain or need or suffering somewhere in the world. The barber who wanted to get the letter from his son, and he somehow went there, got the message to the son. Do you ever get a sense of someone, something in the universe needing your attention, that you can turn your attention, not physically in the room, but kind of a calling?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I send him, her, I send them love. I send them love. And I focus upon them. Yeah. Yeah. That oh dear. That looks like I'm a thing. And I do that because, oh well. it's the way in which one works with compassion. When you do this, the compassion for the world, or all beings, you compassion for love objects. You don't? Oh, no. It's compassion for everybody. And then just a person comes into mind and just, yeah.
Next question.
For Roshi, would you, for just a couple minutes, speak to not being attached to outcome?
You know, at the deepest level, there's no self that's giving. There's no person to whom you're giving. There's no gift. So, you know, this is this realization of boundlessness that arises from prajna, from wisdom beyond wisdom. So that's comes out of the experience of practice in good circumstances. But at the practical level, you know, the sort of pragmatic level, you know, and you work in a very intense situation, Ron, with people who are sliding often very slowly down the mountain toward the valley of mortality. And you know that if you have some idea of what a good death is, usually it's not going to be like you exactly want it to be. And so what happens is, for most people who have that notion, a sense of futility arises, and then you turn away from the work. So, you know, from one point of view, I think I said this a little bit yesterday, you're working for the best outcome possible. You know, you want to free all beings from suffering. Then from another point of view, you recognize that driving toward an outcome relentlessly is often what causes more suffering. So there's this kind of pragmatic aspect. But really the deepest dimension of realization is when the self drops away. Yeah, there's no self, there's no other, so an outcome is just not in the mix. Is that helpful?
Sure.
Then my thing is,
an outcome before and then just
yeah, just practice, practice, practice. It's in the experience of practice that that realization becomes authentic. Something like that.
I'm going to, one question from online audience. Her name is Megan. We'll figure out who wants to answer this one. I want so badly to be a compassionate, loving soul, but being young, I belong to the most disconnected generation the world has known. Between the technology and the mounting fear from dangerous world conditions, I feel cut off, not only from the souls around me, but to my own emotions and spirit. And actually she's asking you, Ram Dass, in such times of separation, how do we begin to connect ourselves to the source?
Well, don't get involved in your mind, because these separations are in your mind. And so being a bhakti, I will use love. I will just see, I am loving awareness. I am loving awareness. I am loving awareness. And then when you be loving awareness, be loving awareness. Then you will look at the world as with all of its warts and all of its ills, and you love it. You love them. And this is a very delicate thing, because to go into the soul we're going to leave the physical body and ego and the ills behind. And you don't want to do that, because that all is one, and they're the Middle East and Syria, they're me. They're me. They're part of the one. And I can't reject them. This person points out the ills of her generation, or her generation. it's her pointing it out is giving it life. Giving it life. If she didn't point it out so much, then the mind, all she'd do, she's love it. She's love it. She's love it. She's love it. I can do with my mind the ills that are produced by the communication problem. But then I do Skype. And I go really loving Skype. I say, is this love? Going this wires and all this, and clouds and wow. These things of communication bring us together, bring us together as one. There was a fellow who started Apple,
Steve Jobs.
Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs had Maharaji in his room as he died. And there's a friend of ours, friends of ours, who some devotees had a son who is was cancer of the lungs. And Steve had the same cancer of the lungs. And they became bonding for during the doctors and all of them. And John, who was the young son, his mother came to a psychic, and I wanted to see John. I'd like to communicate with John, and after he died. And John said to her in very John manner of speaking, I'm here with Maharaji. And Stephen is here with me. See, I know. Well, it's one. It's one. The apple does not fall from the
I think that is how we are closing. The apple does not fall far from the tree. So I think we're going to have lunch now. I did want to say something about Love Serve Remember Foundation. I haven't mentioned it. If any of you are interested, please go to ramdas.org and you'll see a tab there for Love Serve Remember Foundation, which is the Ramdas Foundation that we created that runs everything having to do with all of the retreats and the webcasts and everything, podcasts, all that we do. And we'd love to have we have a lot of support, and we'd love to have your continued support. So please do go there, add yourself to the mailing list, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Raghu.